we can start with our first presenter. Our first speaker is Professor Mohammed AlKawi. Professor Mohammed AlKawi is a distinguished staff in KKESH. He is the Director of Research Ethic Monitoring Office at KKESH, and he's also a professor at Al Faisal University. He's a retired distinguished senior consultant at King Faisal Specialist Hospital in the field of neurology. He's going to present to us the origin of ethical standards, the law and regulations. The mic is yours, Dr. AlKawi.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أولاً, I wish to thank the King Khalid Eye Specialist Hospital and Dr. Swalim and Dr. Rajhi for inviting me to this course, this seminar. I'm going to talk briefly about the origins of medical research ethics and the law in medical research ethics. Number one, to talk about ethics. Ethics is a word that comes from Greek ethika, which means the customs or habits. And it is meant to be the principles of human conduct, and it is the moral principle that governs the behavior of an individual. When we specify it for medical ethics, it's the identification, analysis, and resolution of medical problems or of moral problems that arise in patient care or in research, if we are talking about research ethics. What are the sources of ethical principles? Every culture developed an ethical code based on one of the three principles. The first principle is the religious principle, the divine instructions as revealed in the scriptural texts like the Quran, and or being in agreement with the qualities of human nature, and that is a little bit more fluid type of source, or to follow the rational thought, which can change from time to time depending on the data. There had been codes for practice since the Hammurabi era, the Mesopotamia, and the penalties were imposed for injuries that were sustained through unsuccessful operations by doctors and for damages caused by neglect in various trades, including, of course, the profession of healing. The most well-known oath that talks about the ethics is the Hippocrates oath that was before Christianity, and it came from the Greek physician Hippocrates, and it embodied the basic principles of ethical practice, which remained by itself or variants thereof as standard procedure for graduating new physicians. Talking about whether there had been any Arabic text in medical ethics, Al-Rahawi, who died in 931 Gregorian year, he wrote the first known full textbook dedicated to the ethics of physician. It was called Adab al-Tabib, and it was based on the prevailing Islamic principles. It's a very interesting book. In part of it, he talks about how the physician visits a patient in his home, how he writes his findings. As a matter of fact, he classified the findings in the subjective, objective, assessment, and then plan, which now it is attributed to the problem-oriented medical records as suggested by Dr. Wood about 50 years ago, but this was very well delineated in this book. Also, informed consent was practiced, and in the Ottoman Empire, Dr. Kamal Ajluni wrote in the Lancet in 1995, he showed a case extraction, a case consent from a Christian named Yaqub, son of Ghanim, and the treating physician was Nicola, son of Yani, and this was in November of 1677. And this is the court record بمجلس الشرع الحنيف بطرابلس الشام, etc. etc. حضر الذمي يعقوب بن غانم, and it is dated in 1677. Now, we come to the philosophical basis for ethics. The German philosopher Kant, he is the most famous for his deontology type of theory of morality, and he died in the early 19th century. And he said that the righteousness of an act is based on the intention and the sense of duty. Deon in Greek is the word for duty, and other intrinsic characteristics of the act, not on the consequences. He did not consider the consequences. While the British philosophers like Bentham and John Stuart Mill, around 30 years later, they considered the worth of action by the consequences and the ability of the action to promote happiness, pleasure, or health. And happiness is something that can be mathematically calculated. So this is called the Utilitarianism. Now, quick identification for moral theories. If we ask, does the act intrinsic characteristic fulfill the sense of duty? That's deontology. Does the act promote desirable results for happiness? And that is utilitarianism. And is it likely to be doable? And that is the prevailing American type of pragmatism. Modern medical ethics were reactive, as a matter of fact, not proactive. And they were done in response to World War II atrocities. And the first was known, the Nuremberg Code. Nuremberg is the city where the tribunes for the violators of ethics, of medical ethics, were tried, and they were physicians who committed a lot of atrocities. And then it was followed by the Declaration of Helsinki and the Bellman Report. The Declaration of Helsinki in 1964 by the World Medical Assembly established that it is the mission of a physician to safeguard the health of people. His knowledge and conscience are dedicated for the fulfillment of this mission. While the Declaration of Helsinki was modified in 2000 by the Amendment number 5, talking about basically about how do we test new treatments and talking about the use of placebo. He constricted the use of placebo, and he said that any treatment method should be tested against the best current prophylactic, diagnostic, and therapeutic method. They did not exclude the use of placebo or no treatment in the studies, but they said if there is no proven treatment, prophylactic, diagnostic, then you may use placebo. Now, when we talk about practice and we talk about research, practice is meant to enhance the well-being of an individual and have a reasonable expectation of success because of prior experience. While research, it contributes to generalizable knowledge that can be transferred from the participant who was tested to the others who have similar problems. The intersection between the two is compassionate use. You have a patient that he has a disease that there is no effective treatment, and there is a drug under research that may be effective. You may, without or off-label or without approval of that drug, you may use it in a compassionate fashion, but that should be restricted to only a few individuals who really need it. Now, we come to the principles of medical ethics. The first principle is to respect the person or respect his dignity. Individuals should be treated as autonomous entities. They should be capable of deliberating about their personal goals and acting under such deliberation, and that people with diminished autonomy may need additional protection, such as children who are underage, people with severe developmental or cognitive disorder. And going back to the sources, when we talked about the atrocities of World War II that prompted the modern type of principles, we know that in our creed, in our culture, that the dignity of human beings is enshrined in the Holy Quran. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ وَحَمَلْنَاهُم فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ. The second principle is justice, and justice should be done by resource allocation, that you shouldn't allocate a lot of resources for treatment of the few rather than benefiting the majority. And how expensive technology can be used, it may not be applied to those who cannot afford it. And finding cure for diseases of poorer communities, this is something that the medical profession is very deficient in. They find cures for the diseases of the wealthy. Balancing the individual welfare with the society's welfare. Nobody should be harmed in the name of the society benefit, and justice in doing medical research. Again, in our creed, in our Holy Quran, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُ بِالْعَدْلِ وَالْإِحْسَانِ. This is one of the principles prospectively followed by the Muslim physicians along the history. Beneficence, making efforts to secure the patient's well-being and to maximize the possible benefits, minimize the possible harm, especially when doing research. And al-ihsan again is mentioned in the same surah. Non-maleficence, no individual should be intentionally injured in the interest of securing other individual or societal benefits. And again, ينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي. Now, regulations for implementation of the law that was compiled in the kingdom by the National Committee of Bioethics, and it was issued by the president of King Abdulaziz City of Science and Technology after it was approved by the Council of Ministers and the highest authority in the kingdom. And it was the regulations were updated in 1436, about 5 years ago. The law aims to protect the rights of humans and the environment or any part thereof, and to guarantee the safety and to maintain respect for the dignity of research subjects, and to avoid causing harm to humans, animals, plants, or environment in the course of conduct of research. The field of function, all research involving humans conducted by investigators, staff, research institutes, has to be approved by a local ethics committee, which is generally known as the Institutional Review Board. Which research requires local committee review or approval? Research involving living human subjects, research involving human biological materials, embryos, fetal tissue, reproductive material, and stem cells. All material derived from living or deceased humans should have approval by the local ethics committee. The principal investigator presents a proposal project to the IRB, and he signs it. When he signs it, what does it mean on the final proposal? It means two very important ideas. Number one, that he had written procedures, described them very well. He should follow them to the letter, he and all of his co-investigators. And number two, he brought in an informed consent, how to tell the patient about the procedures that are going to take place in the research. He will be getting the consent properly as had been approved by the local ethics committee. How does the local ethics committee approve? Number one, make sure that there is no violation of the Islamic rules or the kingdom laws, and the risk to human subjects had been minimized, and selection of research subjects is appropriate for the objectives of the project, and that informed consent contains all the required elements, and they are listed in the regulations. And there is a plan for periodic follow-up to ensure the safety of the process, and measures to safeguard the rights and welfare of the participants, and protection of confidentiality of information. We are extracting some personal information. They should be protected and not released to anyone else. Article 44 in the law in Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, a person violating any provision of the law shall be subject to one or more of the following. Number one, he should be written a warning by the local ethics committee or by the administrator of the hospital. Number two, his research may be suspended until the effects of the violation had been rectified. And number three, he may be barred from conducting any further research in the subject or in the subject of the violation. And number four, he may be fined not to exceed 200,000 riyals, which is a hefty type of fine. I think we are done with this introduction. Thank you.